Hey, it's Sexuality Empowerment Coach Heather Elizabeth. And if you like me on Facebook or you get my newsletter, you know that I was at Sexapalooza last weekend. And that is one of my absolutely favorite times of the year because I get to have an entire weekend of hanging out with people and talking to them about sex and sexuality. And it means I meet all sorts of interesting people to have these conversations with. I meet exes who are there together as friends. I meet friends. I meet couples. I meet young people. I meet old people. I meet people who are at a middle-aged or higher, just exploring new parts of their sexuality. I meet people who are middle-aged and younger, just exploring parts of their sexuality. I even met some like parents and adult children this year, and that I loved most of all, especially the mother-daughters, because the mothers were really invested in their daughter's sexuality, not in a like, let's keep my daughter pure way, but in a, I want my daughter to be a happy, healthy individual and have good information about sex and people to talk to. So we came here, and I just like, I love stuff like that. I love people who want to have genuine conversations about sexuality. Uh, and there's always things that stand out every year. Last year, what stood out was the amount of people I met who were dealing with shame and guilt, either around their desire, like they felt they had the wrong desires, or they felt that their desires were deviant, or they felt that they didn't desire enough, and their desires weren't normal because they were too few. And I met a lot of people dealing with shame over their desire as well, and I just saw a lot of pain in people. um, what really stood out this year was the amount of people who were struggling with the concept of normal. A lot of the conversations I had focused around what normal sex was and what normal stamina was and what normal desire was, or people who really felt that they were, just your average, normal, boring person. And I was like, hey, your sex life is not the standard, and here's all these resources that you might want to look at. Um, because normal is not the word that I would apply to your sex life. And that's actually got me thinking, and I try to have these conversations with as many people in person as possible, but I've also got a YouTube channel, so why not have these conversations with you as well, right? See, here's the deal. Normal is kind of a useless word. It has this weird moral connotation to that there's like normal, and then the opposite of normal becomes abnormal or different, become things that are in the circle of normal and then everything else, which is so weird because most of our sex acts, provided that, consenting adults, and you're behaving with good ethics in mind, then morality has nothing to do with most of your acts. Your acts are morally neutral. This is why I so often talk about whether or not choices are healthy or unhealthy for us, because good and bad, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They actually have no place in this discussion. I started shifting to talk about averages a little while ago. So we talk about, what the average person does in bed or what the societal standard is in bed. But, as I continue to grow in my coaching and in my practice and in my education, the less I think those words are actually useful either, because I'm not talking about averages with you. I'm talking about you and your sex life and your desire and, how you feel about your staying power and how you feel about the amount of orgasms you're having or not having, how you feel about the number of sexual partners you have and the type of sex you guys have together, and how you view your sexuality. The only person that your sexuality actually kind of relates to is you and the people who you directly choose to share it with. So that's kind of my challenge to you this week. It's a twofold challenge. Number one, I want you to challenge yourself to definitely stop thinking in terms of normal versus abnormal. And even, try to stop thinking in terms of averages and start thinking about sexuality in terms of you, your partners, and your personal explorations. And then challenge number two If you've been to any of my critical thinking classes, my sexual literacy classes, you know I'm a big fan of critical thinking. Not big rambly thinking, but deep thinking about values and bias and who these ideas came from. So that's challenge number 2. I want you to think about who told you what normal is, and think about why you should believe them. Try to identify their biases, try to identify their hidden agenda, try to identify whether or not they have your personal best interest at heart, or if they're coming from a place that doesn't put you at the center. And then I'll talk to you next week. Later.